is blockchain right for your company? My name is Jason Pansis, and I'm with Envision Blockchain Solutions. And as you can see here, just on the main screen, just a brief overview of our company. We are a Microsoft partner in the blockchain space, as well as an enterprise Ethereum alliance. And we sit in on a lot of their meetings and have a nice background and relation within that organization. Likewise, we are blockchain business certified by the Linux Foundation. And as we all know, the Linux Foundation is involved directly with, they host Hyperledger, which is an open source project. And generally speaking, these two specific ledgers have gained some serious popularity and traction on the blockchain market, alongside some other private ledgers, which we've spoken about previously. And today, just to move forward here, we're going to give you a brief intro about some of our company's services and a little bit about what we do for the enterprise world. And then we're going to get into a little bit of some blockchain 101 and follow that up by getting into the details as to how to understand whether or not blockchain is right for your company. So as mentioned, Envision Blockchain Solutions is a Microsoft partner. We're focused in blockchain agnostic frameworks. That specifically means that we don't have any sort of bias to any one specific ledger. So whether that's Ethereum or Corda or Hyperledger or Quorum, whatever the ledger may be, we're interested in helping develop that specific technology. And we take a specific interest in understanding a company's use case and help them evaluate the appropriate technology in order to host their use case in their environment. Envision Blockchain, we have just a little plug for us, some of our services here. You can see that Envision Blockchain offers an immersion lab. And I know I've seen some familiar faces today in the webinar. Some of you have already joined us in an immersion lab. Some of you have signed up. And I've spoken to a couple of participants here already about the potential of signing up, which, you know, we're always interested in, like I said, hearing more about different organizations and their current use cases and helping them explore this specific technology to help them and their organizations with this concept of organizational transformation. So within that immersion lab, we typically take the individuals through an Azure deployment of the Azure Blockchain Workbench, where we'll help configure that for you in your environment, and likewise offer you a little bit more of an in-depth conversation pertaining to our Blockchain 101, which you'll see in a bridged version here today, as well as give you some opportunity in playing around with some of the smart contract applications that we've developed internally. And of course, in the event that you have any sort of blockchain initiative currently and perhaps any specific questions pertaining to a use case, we leave time for use case discussion as well. Which brings us to our next area of opportunity where we actually host these blockchain use case workshops. They're a little bit more in depth. In the immersion lab, we remain a little bit more at the high level. And of course, we have you know, project plans and timelines for all of the different solutions that you're looking at here, so that if you have any sort of questions regarding these different workshops or exercises, we can of course give you a detailed outline as to what the involvement and rigor may be. Of course, blockchain and IoT solution deployments, these days they're going hand in hand, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that you know, as the webinar progresses here. Training and managed services. We offer both on-site and virtual training. And of course, after enterprise deployment, we do offer managed services for that specific deployment, and of course have SLAs and different things in place to help back that. With regard to, sorry about that, guys. With regard to systems integration, we are, of course, involved heavily with different blockchain POCs, pilots, and of course, full-scale deployments and how they specifically relate to IoT and potentially legacy systems in order to help maintain and keep business processes intact and further build them out. We don't want to, of course, disrupt the current process and the way people are currently existing and shock the entire system. So systems integration is a vital piece of what we do with respect to blockchain implementations. And of course, our leadership always wants a firm understanding and ideas to current business processes. They need to potentially report to the board. Shareholders are always interested in understanding that specific information. And of course, just as a management tool in general, data reporting via Power BI is essential. And we work with some other reporting tools as well. But as a Microsoft partner, we're most familiar with Power BI, and we think that it's an excellent application. So let's begin. We're going to move into Blockchain 101, where we're going to take you on a brief tour of how blockchain technology is really working. And if you've visited us before, my apologies. I'm going to try to breeze through this so that we can really get into the details as to whether or not blockchain is right for your company. With that in mind, let's begin here. In this slide, we can see that IT overall is adding, and we say adding very in particular. There's a lot of discussion around what's the difference between a current a structured database versus blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology today. And realistically, it's a huge topic of conversation, but for all intents and purposes right here, right now, think of blockchain or this distributed ledger technology as a partner to a structured database or any database, I guess, for that matter, where you can theoretically and realistically just verify that these transactions have existed, and we'll get into some of those benefits here in just a couple moments. But generally speaking, that is the concept that I just want you to keep in mind. This IT is adding. This blockchain technology is a partner to these databases. So what is distributed ledger technology? That's the question here. And what you're looking at here on the left-hand side of the screen basically looks like a normal network. And that's essentially what that is. Only in this specific case, each one of these computers that you're seeing that are part of this network, we call them nodes. And they're typically hosted in different VMs. And we can get into those highlights and details in the event that we're in touch here with respect to an immersion lab or any sort of technical discussion on the side. And on the right-hand side, we see three basic components. The first component is data model, which is a component of this distributed ledger technology where we're interested in understanding the current state of the ledger. That's essentially what its main function is. And next, the DLT is comprised of language of transactions, and that is, of course, what changes the ledger state. This specific language of transactions we can call smart contracts and different things like that, which we'll get into in a few. And of course, third is protocol, which we use to build consensus among the different nodes or, I guess, participants of this specific network. And one of the main things that we really need to highlight with all of this in mind, we're looking at this network of nodes or computers and these three basic components as to what the DLT or the distributed ledger technology is comprised of. What we're really looking at is information that's transacted and literally shared across this network. So although the information is decentralized, all of the network is looking at one subset of information in a centralized manner. It's a centralized piece of information that's distributed. Therefore, it is literally distributed ledger technology. And that's essentially where that got its name from. And with that in mind, it brings us to what is blockchain. So we have this concept of distributed ledger technology and blockchain. They have a lot of similarities. And realistically, no difference. But what we're looking at here, let's start with the block itself. That's, in this specific case, that is the vessel. That's, if you want to look at it physically, that's holding or hosting validated transactions. So you have this transaction. This transaction, of course, has details, whether that's text or string details, or of course some sort of hash that might allude to some sort of document. And below that, we see that there's a timestamp and a block reference. So when we connect all of these blocks, we wind up with this distributed ledger or blockchain that's hosted by all these different nodes, where all these different parties can see the same exact transactions at any one given point in time. So moving forward, blockchain or distributed ledgers, they're constructed. It's a construction of this chronological chain of blocks, and hence the name. We refer to the set of transactions bundled together and added to the chain at the same time. So literally, as a transaction comes in, you can see that all the nodes receive this specific transaction and the associated metadata in parallel. And that's that's an essential piece of information as we move forward here. And I guess the next point here is, how do we find or verify that a transaction should be placed within these blocks? And for that, we have something called consensus. Excuse me. This consensus is basically an agreement, which is obviously coded into the network protocol to basically allow for these transactions to come to fruition. So all of the nodes, depending on the consensus algorithm, will agree. And as they agree, they're going to be written to the blockchain. And as you can see, there's a transaction with a specific metadata. This consensus algorithm offers, in this specific case, this consensus algorithm is showing that all of the nodes agree and a ledger transaction is written. And with that in mind, central databases in blockchain, right? So on the left, we have this centralized database, which we currently exist with today and have existed with for the past 20 years or so. And realistically, what's happening is we have our clients and users at the bottom. So as you're working on a day-to-day basis, you're uploading data, whether that's documentation or just general information. And as you upload that information, or you save that information, it's being saved to a centralized location, which we call a database, which is of course managed and hosted by an administrator. And the administrator has the ability to input or delete or omit or whatever permissions the admin may have. But the bottom line is that all of the information is being stored in one central location. Today, blockchain technology is the current day band-aid, if you will, to the centralized database. So for example, we saw beforehand that this blockchain is writing information and confirming transactions once the network has reached specific consensus. And the reason why I'd like to consider it a partner or a band-aid theoretically to the centralized database is simply because when we save that information today to that database, we can now have that information hit the ledger before it's being saved in that database. So the transaction will be hashed and proven that the transaction exists, period. So it can't be tampered with by any admin or any one individual, period. There's literally proof that a transaction happened by a specific person at a specific time on a specific date. Feel free to let us know if there's any questions. Just by the way, there is a chat and we're happy to help answer questions live via chat right now if there's anything immediate. And of course, we'll save some time in the end to help answer any questions that you might have. In this specific slide, we basically see the evolution of technology and kind of how everything's been happening. We have the centralized database, the blockchain, DLT, you know, the mainframes and the way things originally existed there on the left, and of course, underneath that, the internet. So what we really wanted to portray here is just the way things are moving and the way IT continues to add has been very interesting. And you know, our previous session, we had a whole topic and conversation on you know, the evolution of this technology and the process of this digital transformation within these organizations, and how it's constantly important to make sure that you're all learning and staying with the times and seeing how you can learn to continue to mitigate risk or improve the efficiencies of business processes, driving greater ROIs, and of course, you know, outcompeting your competitors and all of the above. So feel free to check out the other webinar previously if you'd like more information on that. So I guess at this point in time, I'd like to take the conversation a step forward and really get into what our company calls our value framework checklist. And there's been a lot of hype around blockchain, likely from the public sector, but if we break that whole concept down, the hype is really about the fact that you have all of the above values that blockchain provides to business and to the world today. And I've heard many, and I've been involved in many conversations, I've heard many people say, well, you know, we have transparency in our documents. We can share documents, or, you know, we can have live updates if we want live updates, or, you know, we have authentication currently. I want to point out that what blockchain is providing, the true hype, the true value that's driving this whole initiative, this whole thing, is the fact that we have all 7 of these values that are combined into one technology today. And as we go through these slides, please keep that concept in mind. Like I said, I've had other conversations with different individuals who, you know, when we're in discovery mode of their specific use cases or looking to develop a specific POC, we take them through these exercises. And those are literally the questions and comments that we receive. So let's discuss intermediaries. Would your business or business process benefit from third parties to increase business process efficiency? What does that really mean? What exactly is an intermediary? Why do we have them? You know, eliminating the need for a centralized third party to offer transactions can offer businesses many benefits. You know, blockchain value in particular is interested in network latency, which is directly correlated to speed and transaction efficiency. So waiting on these third parties to basically catch up to your current day business process is actually an inefficient happening, which blockchain aims to solve. And with that in mind, I just wanted to give you a brief visualization as to where blockchain really fits into, between the parties. So just a brief visual there. And realistically, we have to ask ourselves, in order to truly understand within a business process, whether or not you need an intermediary, you know, aside from understanding what the intermediary is, what is the intermediary really there doing? They're there to prevent, you know, a forging of a transaction per se. Maybe they're there to prevent somebody from deleting a transaction, or maybe they're to prevent somebody from omitting a transaction, right? So for example, in the event that you have any sort of business process where you're between yourself and you know, this other business, these are your specific fears, whether they're going to forge something, whether they're going to delete something, whether they are going to omit something. And keeping one ledger proves to both sides that there was an action, which in turn, of course, deserves a reaction. And blockchain plays an integral part of this specific process because you have a non-biased network that's confirming these transactions where both you in your business and the opposite party in their business have access to the same exact transactional data on both sides, where neither of them where neither party can go back and delete a specific transaction or say that a transaction didn't exist, because in the event that it did exist, it should be written to the ledger. So with respect to forging a transaction, deleting a transaction, or omitting a transaction, blockchain becomes the responsible party, thereby eliminating the need for that third party hire, which could theoretically save cost, and at the same time, increase the business process efficiency, because you or your employees are no longer waiting on the opposite party to complete whatever business process you're looking to have completed. So that brings us to transparency. Transparency is a very interesting one, and we kind of just touched up on it, but would your business or process benefit from having shared read-write access to a database? Should transactions be public or private? What does that really mean, transparency, right? We have this distributed ledger. We have transactions that are being approved in parallel, or maybe not in parallel, but prior to them being written, all need to be, all nodes need to agree that this is the appropriate transaction prior to them being written. So what is transparency? Transparency specifically refers to the ability for different businesses to be able to see the same exact information all at the same time. So we're interested in identifying whether or not your business partner's current process state. We're interested in, like it says, identify your business partner's current process state in real time. We hear a lot in recent times with respect to blockchain and use cases within supply chain. And I will certainly agree that that is actually, my former background in supply chain and logistics, and I can wholeheartedly say that that is the one thing, a couple years back that really brought me to this specific industry in blockchain in particular. I saw the value immediately. I was interested in conducting business internationally. There were business processes that were happening overseas that I was not privy to. There might have been financial transactions that I might not have been privy to, or they were loading different containers that I didn't know when they were loading or when the ports were received, so on and so forth. And I had no visibility into understanding where I was in that current process, and therefore I couldn't prepare my crew or my employees on my end with specific documentation, paperwork, perhaps payments. A lot of different areas of opportunity open up when you have that specific visibility in real time. And we'll get to that here in just a few moments. And I'm sure that there's plenty of other use case examples where you'd be interested in understanding the current process that maybe it's not even, maybe it actually might be internal process, right? So for example, if you're a manufacturing company for either a car company, a manufacturer for vehicles, automotive, or aircraft manufacturer, again, a supply chain type concept. But if you have parts that are moving around the world in different pieces of automobiles being designed and manufactured in different parts of the world, where is even your business, your own crew in those separate locations? Where are they in their specific processes? Where are the parts? Tracking everything in real time. And at the same time, if you can recall a couple of slides back, I asked everybody to just bear in mind that there are 7 values that we're discussing here. And we've spoken about a couple of them, but realistically, the prime value, the prime the quote unquote hype that's existed in this specific emerging technology really revolves around the fact that we have this transparency. We have the ability to eliminate, a third party all at the same time. And that's extremely valuable because at that specific juncture, you're capable of advancing business processes or even revenue streams that have not yet even been discovered. Golden sources. This is a great one. Great one. Is it important for your business and or your clients to rely on a specific source for confirming data? Golden sources is nothing new to IT. We, as enterprise organizations, we're always interested in really securing information and understanding the validity of that specific information. And in recent times, we have started to hear about the Internet of Things. I know with a little bit of project management background and databasing, we've heard the term garbage in, garbage out, and how that relates to reporting capabilities. All of the above. I'm sure that we can all agree that golden sources is not new, and that this has been a topic of conversation since IT has been around, period. I guess even before IT, you can make that argument as well. And with respect to, let's say, Internet of Things, we have these devices that you can see up here on the screen that they're programmed to do exactly what they're programmed to do. And today we have Internet of Things that are operating, let's say, without distributed ledger technology or blockchain, where these devices may be communicating and reporting back to a centralized database, which might be nice for you internally for your own business. But in the event that you are interested in reporting that to another business, perhaps the other business is not interested in, let's say, trusting that specific information, right? We had that centralized database with your admin where you have your devices reporting back to it, but how can the opposing party confirm that everything is 100% true and trustworthy? And I guess if you flip the table around and you sit in the other party and you're paying a specific vendor to do something for you, you're interested in knowing what exactly is being reported, when it's being reported, and whether or not it's accurate. And with respect to golden sources, that's exactly what we're referring to. Now you have the ability to have this transparency, meaning we have this distributed ledger, we have this blockchain. My business has a specific copy of it, your business has a specific copy of it, perhaps several other vendors or business partners that we share a specific network have specific access, but not necessarily to see who's transacting or what's been transacted, but the ability to assign that sort of visibility given those specific permissions, given that specific opportunity. So Internet of Things, although can operate separately from the blockchain, once again, blockchain increases its efficiency and validity when it comes time to reporting and trustworthiness of those specific sensing devices and measures. So just moving things forward, I wanted to get into a little bit on manual processing. So we discussed transparency, we discussed golden sources, we've discussed eliminating third parties and a couple others. But with respect to manual processing, are you looking for ways to reduce the complexity of business logic? And again, keeping in mind that all 7 of these values can be happening in parallel. It's very important to ask yourself this very question. We look at manual processing and then we think to ourselves instantly, automation. And that's true. That's true. And we can have, again, automation. Right now, we have tons of automation. So why blockchain? What is the point? We have automation without blockchain. What's the investment based on? How do I explain this to my leadership? What is the use case here? Automation based on immutable data, potentially across multiple parties and systems. Blockchain, we take us back to Blockchain 101. We want to discuss this concept of immutable data. Once we reach consensus across the network and information is written to the blockchain, it becomes immutable. It can't be changed. Right? Theoretically, it's possible for it to be changed, but the likelihood is extremely low. I've heard somebody tell me at some point in time the likelihood was less. It was more likely to get struck by lightning 3 different times and then something else happened than it'd be possible for us to be able to go back and change data that was transacted on the blockchain. So I guess let's just discuss business logic for a split second, just to clarify this concept. What is business logic? Business logic is the segment of computer software that operates within the real world business rules, which regulate how data can be created, stored, and changed. That I would say is the definition of business logic in this specific case. So real world business rules which regulate how data can be created, stored, and changed. We are creating data on a day-to-day, we're storing it on a day-to-day, and of course, data can be changed. So with that in mind, what does manual processing really have to do with that? Well, when we combine these specific values of transparency, and we're going to get into trust, and we're going to get into golden sources, we got into golden sources and several others. We have this concept of this smart contract that we briefly mentioned beforehand, which is you can think of as an application that's running within the blockchain. You have a specific application, and as you work your way through this business process, the state of this application changes, triggering other specific events, which may be automated, or may just specifically trigger, another persona or another individual within the business process to be taking a specific action. So creating, storing, and changing data. This manual processing, this is automation, not just plain automation. This is automation that's based on immutable data. It can't be changed. So once an automatic function happens, it's written, and it can be written for multiple parties to see. Likewise, this immutability and this automation may be triggering business processes within other organizations to be set off, so that you can have a specific action in business A trigger another process in business B. And because both sides share the same specific ledger, and both sides can trust each other and see each other and share the specific information, they can now interact with one another and have these automated processes all in one in this so-called trustless environment. And trust is a vital piece of why blockchain is a huge value store today, and this is one of the primary reasons, in my opinion, that blockchain is really an emerging technology that's on many organizations' radar at the moment. This concept of trust can be discussed in grave detail because it extends across many different business processes. The question is, does your business or process require you to store information that others may need to access? Maybe that thought of them accessing the information is a scary thing, and it is. And maybe even access might even be the wrong word. It may be, because it can be looked upon in many different ways. When we talk about accessing specific information, we don't necessarily mean changing information. We might just mean that concept of transparency. We might mean that concept of needing that specific automation. It might mean several different parameters, and that's really the business value add that we have here. In no other time, I mean, yes, we can share specific documents, yes, we can share specific information, but those might be settings. There's a lot of different parameters that you need to assign, and you need to assign the same thing, let's say, within blockchain. But the bottom line is that you have this visibility, you have these golden sources, you have this concept of trust, you have this concept of immutability, which we spoke about, which really backs this concept of trust. If you think about it, right? Like, why do we trust these different businesses to be taking a look at? Now, obviously, given, like I said beforehand, not every business is be able to see every specific transaction. Those are parameters and different things that you set up within your network, and of course, your application to provide. But this concept of immutability allows for this transparency. It allows for businesses to really trust one another in today's business environment. And I guess just briefly, assuming people are not malicious in business, mistakes happen, and having the ability to reconcile these records between business is really required in a timely practice. So, the DLT combines multiple values, like I was saying, discussed prior, that really allows us the ability to capture innovative business process ideas that we haven't seen, and of course allows to increase the efficiency of the business processes that currently exist. Authentication is an interesting one. We've actually had several use cases in our current experience that we've been involved with respect to different authentication. And I guess just a brief overview, authentication you can think of just as a normal sign-in, if you will. So does your business or business process require the need to authenticate users or clients? Excuse me one second. Okay. And I guess the real bottom line here is, does your business require that? And the likelihood is yes. And you can really, when you look at this screen here and you see this authentication 1.0, that's our way of saying that's a normal username and password. And authentication 2.0 is this multi-factor authentication, MFA. So you put in your password, it prompts you for a text message or an email, or potentially they're, on your cell phone, or maybe even computer these days, there might be some biometric, for your fingerprint, to kind of unlock and move the process forward into entering that application or whatever device you might be looking to enter. And that's authentication 2.0 in this world. So where does blockchain really play a role in authentication 3.0? Well, today you can literally have your authentication process recorded, so you can see all of the transactions of record coming in and out of any time that you log in or log out. You can align that specific process. Likewise, you can store this specific user information in the blockchain in order to help authenticate that whole process. So I guess just briefly in my notes, I wrote the value associated with making sure that someone's identity is both secure and accurate is vital to all people on a daily basis. So again, there's really great use cases out there pertaining to authentication in how blockchain really secures different individuals' identities and with respect to GDPR compliance, offers an array of opportunity and new features that business is just beginning to recognize through blockchain technology. And I'd say, just moving forward into time sensitivity here, this I believe is the last slide. This is one of the largest areas of opportunity that I personally see blockchain improving. And we discussed it briefly before when we were discussing transparency, trust. I was discussing the use cases within the supply chain. But we also see this concept erupt across every single business, this concept of time sensitivity. Would your business process benefit from live data? The answer is obviously yes. Everybody wants everything literally at the drop of a dime. Welcome to the 21st century. We want information right now. And the reason for that is because in order to increase business process efficiency, we need to take more of a proactive approach. Proactive approach in business directly correlates to strengthening or providing a greater ROI within business, because when you're proactive within a specific business process, it literally means that you're preventing error from happening. It means that you are taking the appropriate measures to save time rather than waiting for something to wind up happening and then the house of cards kind of falling. So we had an excellent conversation with another supply chain manufacturer not too long ago, specific to aviation, and they were very interested in exploring the idea of moving parts around to different parts of the world. Likewise, similar type of conversation that we've had in the past with different automotive manufacturers. So they're interested in understanding when different parts were going to arrive. They're interested in understanding perhaps they're going to monitor or track those specific parts, let's say within aviation, to understand whether or not a specific part is going to require maintenance. Perhaps that concept is going to prevent future incidents in aviation or accidents. There's a difference between those two in aviation that we specifically refer to this proactive versus reactive nature in maintaining. Likewise, if you want to discuss the concepts in finance, or if you want to discuss the concepts in medicine or healthcare, we can discuss multiple different use cases in several different verticals where this concept of this proactive nature in business versus reactive nature in business is very important. I know, for example, if you want to just take a look at it this way, within the financial sector, and I know that's where blockchain originated from. Those were its roots, right? Currency in this financial sector. What's the deal? Well, say we make a transaction today. I send somebody a specific financial transaction. You'll see that transaction pending in your bank account for a day, maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days. And, not to get too detailed or to go down the track of the concept of, central banking, versus side commercial or regional banks and how everything transfers. The bottom line is at the end of the day, everybody needs to rectify that specific ledger, so to speak. And once they understand what their outbound versus inbound is, they can, of course, offset whatever the difference may be. And then they process that specific information in order to make those transfers, in order to complete those specific financial transfers. We call that concept batch processing. And I'm sure that even within business, with respect to the way data is uploaded, or different applications run, a lot of different parts of business today use this concept of batch processing. Blockchain, because this ledger is distributed to your business partners, all have access to this same ledger. We have that visibility or that transparency. We have that concept of trust. We can rely on this specific subset of information through these golden sources. We have the ability to eliminate these specific, third parties. And to this slide's point, we actually have all of that information now across all of these specific parties in real time. So that specific concept, when you look at all 7 of these values and combine these specific values and features into one specific technology, is pretty remarkable. And we do believe and have been watching on a daily basis the news in the advancements of technology specific to blockchain and how things are coming to fruition. We do see things moving forward, and we do see the adoption rate increasing, and we do see the success rate of these POCs moving forward into pilot states. And we're starting to see different products go live into global production for a lot of these enterprise organizations. Likewise, we also see a lot of these organizations investing their resources into understanding how they can further develop business process, maybe by eliminating steps in between. So we can now have processes that have never existed before now exist in today's time. Likewise, our specific focus and strategy when we meet with a lot of our clients is to really gain a deep understanding and knowledge as to where they are and in their exploration, and then try to begin understanding not only the nature of their business, but we try to isolate and identify specific business processes and begin honing in on their ideas and using these 7 values to truly understand whether or not blockchain is going to serve the correct purpose in that specific business process for that specific organization. And then, of course, the topic of how we use, how we go about extending or how we use this specific use case, or how we can further develop other business processes in conjunction with this process is of course always fun conversations that we enjoy having. But for the sake of understanding what Envision Blockchain does, and for the sake of understanding whether or not blockchain is right for your company, we actually offer, in the Azure Marketplace, you can find this enterprise blockchain immersion session that we have. It's a workshop that's typically a half day. And I was explaining it a little bit at the beginning, and I know that there are some individuals that are actually on this call today who are currently enrolled and some who have already completed. So, I look forward to all those who are currently enrolled, and thank you for all those who have joined us, in the past for these immersion sessions. Our job and our anticipation for this specific technology in assisting the organizational transformation process for the enterprise world has been very fascinating to me, as well as my business partner here, Dan, who's also on the call with us here today. Many of you have spoken to him as well. But I suppose just to kind of move things forward, we'd like to help answer any questions that you might have pertaining to both pertaining to whether or not blockchain is right for your business. And I know today that these 7 values is a very high level overview, and there's a lot of intricate details that we didn't necessarily get into because they're use case specific or business process specific or vertical specific. There might be regulatory issues with using blockchain at the moment for different industries, or different concerns that theoretically exist across the board that we couldn't necessarily go into direct detail. But today's session was really focused and targeted on delivering these specific 7 values and having you begin to understand how or what to look for within your business, within the business processes that you deal with on a daily basis, to understand if that specific value would be valuable to you in that moment in time. Would would having that would having live data that's trustworthy and transparent to a couple different organizations that you're specifically involved with this business process, would that be worthy to what you're doing in today's time? Feel free, like I said, to ask any questions. I suppose just a brief plug to us just once again. So what's next? Feel free to schedule a demo with us. We offer a complimentary blockchain value assessments. Like we had just mentioned beforehand, you can find the Envision Blockchain Immersion Lab in the Azure Marketplace. That's a complimentary offering. Likewise, the Blockchain Use Case Workshop, and of course, any sort of blockchain solution deployments. Feel free to ask any questions across either any of our services, whatever concerns you might already have or questions you might have pertaining to whether or not blockchain is right for your company, and that would be a great time.